leadership really is a profession, and
Mm.
we do not, those who voice it as a soft skill or something like that don't do it justice, possibly dismissing it because it seems inconvenient. Leadership is in fact a profession, and with my background, I've seen various levels of both leadership competence and incompetence.
Mm.
Those who treat it as though it is their professional responsibility are the ones who tend to get it right. So,
welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with my very special guest, who I met through Sphere and the resilience community that we have. I think that's how we got together. Yeah. Mark Nitz. Mark is founder of Clearsight Leadership and Strategy. Mark is teaching me new words. Geospatial is one of those. Okay, did not know what that was. And also exposure to other stuff. I love just your presence, how you're the stuff that you're exposed to, so that you can challenge me, because you're in this leadership and strategy space, but you came at it from a different angle than I did, based on your background and everything that went. So I'm super excited to have this chat, and I know that you've got a quote to kick us off with.
well, thank you very much, Michele. I appreciate it, and glad to be here. Glad to share the quote that I brought along is from Roosevelt's Man in the Arena, and it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. It is just a small chunk of the entire poem, but I think it is really, really important. It is almost critical for humans in leadership positions to remember that those who criticize or critique where we fail, that opinion really isn't what matters. What matters is your opinion and the opinion of your team and how you recover from those failures. And I think the deeper we get into leadership structures and organizations, the more important that is.
It's interesting when you say that, is that I look at the ability for leaders to create the space that people can fail. There's not a fear of failure. It's not a fear-based culture. And so that stuff is vital, because I think, I know that if we don't create that space to where people don't have a fear of failure, we've shut down innovation. We've shut down any of that growth, any of that stuff going on, because the people don't feel comfortable to do it. They're always looking out. So then now they're going to pull back in and go, okay, yeah, we can't go there because we're not sure that it's going to work.
Right. Yep. And yeah, and I think that's really something to underline and highlight as far as one of the many tasks of a true professional leader with a team is going even just a little bit deeper than the phrase psychological safety, or and I know there's some ongoing conversation about that term, but going beyond that to the failure piece and being really, really clear what we mean about that. And it's not that, oh, well, we failed, oh well, there's not a laissez-faire approach to failure. It is, we failed, or I failed my people if I'm the leader. How do we fix it? Did this create some sort of problem? Okay, let's mitigate the problem, and then how do we account for this in the future? Did we not hit a deadline? Is there a way that we can be better about efficiency or effective practices that save time? Asking the right questions from that attitude of, we all fail, we all trip and fall on our face. Nobody learned to walk the first time simply by standing up and starting to walk, right?
There may be somebody out there that literally boom, landed, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're amazing. You're a child prodigy walker," right? Yeah.
There could be. Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't either one of my children or grandchildren that experienced that. The thing that you're talking about is, and I think it's an important call out, is that we're not talking about lack of accountability. We're
Right.
we're talking about accountability with this very structured process and expectation that we're going to go push the limits, right? We're going to do the in process improvement, lean thinking, it was go slow to go fast, right? So we're going
Yep.
to do the deep understanding of the work on the front end of it to be clear on the problem that we're solving and, major contributors. And we're going to establish countermeasures that we believe when we've identified the magnitude of the impact that that stuff's going to have on this problem that we're closing the gap on. So the
Mhm.
structure's there, right? The discipline's
Yes.
there, if you
Yep.
will. So
Mhm.
it's not this willy-nilly, we're just going to go try stuff. That being said, we don't know with absolute certainty if we're pushing ourselves to do things differently that what this thing that we're proposing will work. So whether you
Right.
call it PDCA, PDSA, whatever it goes
Mhm.
into, there is some plan that you have,
Mhm.
but you're gonna, do the plan, you're gonna study the results, you're gonna make adjustments, and you're gonna do it
Mhm.
again.
Yep.
But it's this expectation of leadership that they're not coming back going, what do you mean it didn't work?
Right.
Instead of
Yep.
saying, what did we learn?
Hmm.
What are we doing differently?
Hmm.
And
Yep.
I think that's the biggie that you're calling out.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's a lot of leaders that, because they've got this, I believe, expectation of results,
Hmm.
that they're cascading down that expectation of results to the team and not communicating back up, going, yes, here's what's going on, here's the progress we're making, and here is the new timeline, or here's the learning that we've done. Because a lot of times in an organization that can be fear-based, they get this communication from above and they don't communicate back other than I understand or
Right.
got
Yep.
it.
Hmm. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and there's this pressure cooker there when you do that.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And I think the responsibility there too with the risk piece also rests on how the executives or the C-suite understand what what risk is, and if we think it's not really an organism, but if we think of risk like an organism,
Mhm.
uh, where does that risk really start? How does it grow? How does it shrink? And it is I would like to drum into those executive teams that reducing numbers does not in fact reduce your risk. And you can apply, you mentioned lean, for instance, when I was doing my
Mhm.
lean certification, all sorts of systems that you can choose. Almost every system still relies on people.
Mhm.
And there are factors within a people system that you still cannot say engineer the numbers down to where it's, oh, we've reduced risk because people are going to do this thing this way, and that sounds good, but the environmental factors, the family factors, the fact that every person who walks through that door when they start work is still a person.
Mhm.
It's not something that you can scrub away or engineer away uh, or frankly ignore. And the best risk mitigation factor on the planet is for leaders to engage with their people, ask the right questions, and
Mhm.
assure that everybody is ready for whatever that project or task is. uh, Without that, it doesn't matter how often or how many iterations of risk numbers you go through, there's still significant risk that something could happen with your people that's going to prevent success, and we need to know it.
So uh, I had a definition in my head of risk, and then you started talking about risk.
Mm-hmm.
What is your definition of risk in this situation? Because I'm hearing something nuanced a little bit different.
Yep. So I agree that numerically that existing analysis, that existing mathematical equation of risk, yes, it works, but there are factors within processes and systems that it cannot adequately account for. And one of those ties directly to the psychology and the social interactions of people.
Okay.
And we take it for granted because all too often we've heard that, well, you can't really calculate that. And I agree, you can't calculate it. But I don't agree that means that you simply ignore it in the equation. Because the well-being of your people and their trust in their leaders is a significant factor. It can influence how they perform. And if you're not aware of it, if you're not tracking that there's something wrong, or there's something great, or there's something they're anticipating, or that there's this underlying culture of distrust that people just can't seem to put their finger on, there's a factor that is going to significantly influence the risk of that project or that outcome that has no metric. There is not a number that can be applied to it.
So I'm going to go back to change management is what I'm going to do, because that's what I'm hearing. So the risk is the risk of not hitting targets or not achieving the results of the goal, the strategy, or whatever the stuff is. And all the stuff that you were saying just now, and you're absolutely right, the human factor is extremely powerful. And I think one of the missteps that I'm going to say oversights probably better than anything else that I've seen leaders and organizations take is not being considerate enough about when change is happening, right? And understanding that anytime we set new goals and targets that require things to change because our current processes deliver our current results. So if I'm gonna, and maybe let's just say current process delivers, I'm just going to make stuff up right now, year-over-year growth of 3%. Okay. And we now have a target that our year-over-year growth is going to be 10. So we don't have processes in place to deliver 10. We have processes in place to deliver 3. Okay. And I'm not referring to growth that's part of we're raising our prices.
Right.
That's not growth. Right. So it requires us to do something different. And so it's important to think about if we're asking people in our organization, no matter how big or how small, to do something different than they currently do, it's change. And we need to manage change. And there needs to be communication around that. The thing that I've found more recently that's shown up is that change is happening in the organization. The leaders that have oversight to the part of the organization that's being impacted by that change are looking to another part of the organization that does change and communication to communicate to their people what's happening, and they're complaining that the communication, I'm just going to say, sucks. My word, not theirs. Okay. So my encouragement to those leaders is, a question first is, well, how are the people that are responsible for this communication? Oh, by the way, you're part of it, but how are they getting feedback that you need more than what you currently have? And I think what happens a lot of times is things are in silos that people aren't. My dog is scratching. People aren't. I'm like, what is that noise? People aren't in a feedback loop. They're not, they're siloed. So you've got communications are doing what they believe is right. They don't realize that it's not landing for ops because the organization actually needs more. And the leaders in the organization, ops, aren't communicating with people who are supposed to do communication, saying, hey, we need more. There's questions, there's all this stuff going on. So I encourage leaders to, how do you give feedback? How are
Yep.
you
Yep.
letting people know? Don't wait for this stuff to come to you. You're the one who knows that your team is crumbling. They're
Yep.
like,
Mhm.
stories are going, fear is rapid, they're nervous about stuff. Go pull, give feedback, find out what's going on. And I think
Yes.
that's one of the things you're talking about is whoever has the pulse on what's going on with people, there are rules that we have in change to give feedback so that
Yes.
adjustments can
Absolutely.
be made.
Yep.
It's like the
Yep.
FAQs or the FAQ that you have in that moment until you
Yep.
find out there's other questions,
Mhm.
right? That we
Yep.
can update. So I think
Yep.
that's the thing for me that triggers when you were talking is we need to be able to manage the human side of change that happens. And when we're doing improvement, innovation, or anything else, stretching for strategy,
Yep.
things have to change.
Yep. Yep. I have a method or really it's uh, kind of an allegory, something proverbial that I provide a lot of my clients with respect to change. And it starts with just how does your day start? And almost everybody can say, yeah, I wake up and they've got this routine, which is good.
Mhm.
And for some of those things, relying on routine is important.
Yeah,
Some energy because the heuristics work. Get up,
they
brush teeth,
do.
you know,
Takes less energy.
right, right. Have some coffee, get dressed, you know, eat breakfast, head out the door. Okay, great. How many of those people, what's the percentage of people who, when they hop in their vehicle and they start their commute, follow the exact same person out of their HOA parking lot or onto the highway every single day? And the answer is probably zero.
I mean, that would be a little bit weird. So
Uh-huh.
if you are following them, you could ride share. Okay.
Right, that too. Which is a whole nother efficiency topic.
Whole
And,
different thing, right? A whole nother opportunity.
and the reason I use that is that those people still arrived at work and they were still able to, turn on their computer, get things going, have their first meeting. But something about their day today was different than yesterday.
Hmm.
And they managed to get through it. And the reason that that can be so critical is tomorrow, who are you going to be behind when you're getting on the interstate? What
Hmm.
happens if you get on the interstate and there's a, semi jackknifed in the middle of the,
Hmm.
and when you start thinking about change as something that is forthcoming, you start to enter into strategy thought space.
Hmm.
You can start to scenario develop. And when you start to scenario develop, the communication of that change becomes a whole lot more clear because you can ask those questions.
Well, and I think you're anticipating certain things.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting thing to think about, right? Because when you were talking, and I'm just going to go back, it jumped in my brain about, because I never thought of it that way, is how many times you actually follow the same car into work every day?
Mm-hmm.
You know? My brain went to, and how often you actually even notice it.
Right.
It's heuristics, right? So the hard
Mm-hmm.
wiring that came into
Mm-hmm.
it, we end up doing it all the time. Either we're driving to work or we're driving home, and we don't remember the blow by blow
Right.
things that happen
Mm-hmm.
until, to your point, there's a significant change
Yes.
to
Yep.
what took place. Like, okay, great. Now there's a jackknife semi and I'm stuck. Are you stuck?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why for me, like
Mm-hmm.
the with technology that's out there now, I don't care where I'm going. I have Waze on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care where I'm going because
Yep.
but people are like, but you know how to get there. Yeah, I know how to get there as long as everything's fine. But
Yeah.
can I anticipate that there's something up ahead that I need to reroute myself? No, not until I get there and I'm in it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it only took one time of me being in it that there was a drive and I was one of the speakers that had to be in front of the room,
Mm-hmm.
that I left in plenty of time.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 45-minute drive normally that took 4 hours.
Ooh.
because I was in it.
Uh-huh.
So had I had ways, the other
Yep.
people that had ways,
Mm-hmm.
ways routed them around this
Mm-hmm.
thing before they were in it,
Yep.
right? And then they were able to get there on time.
Yeah.
So for me, it is that experience, that change, that stuff that happened. So now anticipating, I'm more proactive in being able to change because someone else is scanning the environment for
Yes.
stuff that could go wrong.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And that actually is a great segue into, from, yeah, we've got some leadership principles, and I shared with you my leadership skills menu, which
Yes.
I, we can dig into at some point, the skills of things like communication, which everybody's aware. Oh yeah, leaders need to communicate, but how,
Mm-hmm.
when, which questions do you ask? And one
Mm-hmm.
of the pieces of communication that I teach is critical information requirements, which is all about what are you listening for? You ask
Mm-hmm.
your team a question, what is it you're listening for in response? What didn't you hear?
Mm-hmm.
Were you expecting to hear all sorts of, fill in the blank, and you
Mm-hmm.
didn't? If so, reevaluate what you communicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And examples like that are why I'm pushing very, very hard uh, for executive leaders to not just recognize but hop on board with
Mm-hmm.
leadership as a profession in itself. It's not a soft skill. I've been told that numerous times over nearly 30 years.
Human skills are not soft.
Skill. Because it's not about charisma. It's about understanding all of the details of everything in every single hat that you wear.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't understand those, if you're not managing, you're not leading. And if you don't understand the principles of that overarching why this matters, what's the
Mm-hmm.
purpose, how do we get our people involved in that purpose, that's the less managerial side. But if you don't have both, you're not leading. There is no
Mm-hmm.
dichotomy between management and leadership. And how that segues really is that plus you're talking about ways. And hey, I've got my geospatial unit here on my dashboard. Is that when you're a solid, when leaders finally get into that professional leadership thinking space, geospatial technology, it turns out, is absolutely fantastic for evaluating what might happen 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, helping develop scenarios for can we see all four dimensions, both where this business is, but also how much time this can take, because time is actually is quite critical, and
Mm-hmm.
geospatial has the ability to track that. Can we evaluate scenarios that show us what the most likely set of plans for making this business work in this area actually are? And
So that's in the geospatial. I'm so freaking curious about this. So
yep.
what does that explain to people? I literally got a Reader's Digest version definition of geospatial. So my
Mhm.
brain is trying to like merge
Mhm.
these things together. So say more.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the heart of geospatial or GIS has always been the map, and we understand our world better when we see things on maps.
Mm-hmm.
And the parallel is that I personally have never been in a meeting where somebody didn't ask the question, where's that happening? Right. And someone has to say, oh yeah, about 3 miles south of St. Louis, or something along those lines, right? Well, where's that?
And then I just had a visual of put a pin in it, right? So this pin
Right.
drops in that
Yep.
location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we do, like digitally with
Yes.
technical maps, GIS maps. Well, over the course of time, we grow our data sets and we add timestamps, date and timestamps to all those data. So we can go back and we can see, oh, here's been the progress of this this business, or here's the progress of this project, something along and it so happens that you can kind of flip that and mirror it for projecting what may happen with your business. And we do that by, with that pin in that map. Yep, here we are. Put our pin in the map, and what might happen with changes in demographics. What might happen with changes in economic indicators, the consumer price index. If that starts to shift significantly, how might that impact the local customers of this business or the clients? If they're, I have a couple of clients in the financial and banking world. What are the, if risk indices start to change significantly, will that impact their bank customer base? Will it impact their commercial customer base? And how? And where do those people work? And where are those businesses? How is that economic situation likely to impact the ability of that bank to provide service, or the need for the services in the first place?
It almost feels like a SWOT analysis on steroids.
It absolutely is.
Yes. And it's this interesting thing, right? Because we can do predictions based on past, right, and influence and stuff that happened. It's an interesting animal when we start to step into the rapid pace of change that's happening.
Yes.
We talk about AI and it's exciting. There's this, I was listening to a podcast recently with I think it was Diary of a CEO, and it had people on there from radically different perspectives around AI. Which is great because, if you're just going to sit in a space that people think it's wonderful, you're not going to be prepared for, the other stuff. And if you sat in this space where, fear-based and, doomsday predictors, you're not going to move forward and you're going to miss opportunities.
Yep.
So I think there's a responsibility to expose ourselves to all that stuff.
Absolutely.
But and I wonder how much, because we don't really know, but wonder how much what we're faced with now at the rapid pace of change, how that gets layered in and how much it impacts what we knew from the past going forward, because the rate of change is so radically different.
Yes. Yep. And that's actually, you've obviously keyed in on that point before you met me. So it's, I think, an interesting discussion to have about, what is that rate of change? And what's the rate and the rate of change of the data collection, the data management, the data analysis, all the data world stuff. And I think it could be enormously significant, like to the level of businesses who aren't going to last very long. At the same time, I think there's the rate of change of adaptive thinking for the human being. And our brains are definitely better at doing the human brain thing than a computer. At the same time, how are we going to understand, just essentially ethical use of AI? How are we going to understand the whether or not we should question? And that sounds like, I'm on one hand talking over here, and on the other hand, I'm way over here. But the two do meet, because you have to think about, should I be using up all the energy that's necessary to tell me how to better manage a data lake or a series of data stores? And, should I be using Azure data lake, or should I be using AWS, or we
Mm-hmm.
and you're consuming energy asking the GPTs to do that. So there's
Mm-hmm.
that piece of it. There's also the piece, do I know enough to ask this question of an artificial intelligence system and get a response that's meaningful?
Well, meaningful to you,
Right.
right? Because you could get, and do you know enough? Because the AI still hallucinates.
Mhm.
So do you know enough to go, that doesn't make sense?
Mhm. Right,
You
exactly.
know,
Yep.
and actually say that doesn't make sense and not take it verbatim, because I've had those conversations with chat
Mhm.
to where chat will come back with something. And I said, that makes absolutely no sense, what you're telling me, whether it's
Yep.
coding or whatever it may be. And
Mhm.
chat goes, you're absolutely right. Thanks for catching that. And I'm
Yes.
like,
Thanks.
dude, if I hadn't said it, you basically would have told
Yep.
somebody else and they didn't question it and then they try and do
Mhm.
that stuff. But my
Yep.
brain, I'm like, okay, that makes no sense.
Yep. And I use the Theranos comparison with that,
Oh, okay.
because if you I'm not a doctor, so if I were to ask Chat GPT, and it would probably, I've never tried this, so it would probably tell me something, well, I'm not a doctor, I can't give you medical, but how do I perform neurosurgery for a patient with glioblastoma or something?
Yeah, well, they may chat may
Yeah.
come back and tell you, but you don't necessarily know how to
Yeah.
do that.
I'm not exactly. I'm not going to know
Yeah.
enough. Oh, okay. Yeah, that
Let me
sounds
go do
great.
that now. I'll come back to you and let you know how it went.
But being an information management developer, app and data developer, I can tell, just like you, I can tell the GPT comes back and says, well, do these 7 things. And I go, did you forget about, you know, you
Fill
know,
in the blank.
I said this has to have tenancy, so that means we have to be able to duplicate rapidly. And it goes, oh, yeah. And if you let it go, and I've experimented with this, if you let it go, it will iterate that project or that idea out
As
to
if
something
it's
that
fact.
looks like it's really cool, but
Yeah.
you'll never achieve it. One glaring example is building scrapers.
Okay.
And I asked it just because I was curious what it would say about, can I build a scraper, knowing full well the answer is no. Can I build a scraper for events showing up on Facebook?
Mm-hmm.
And it started out, oh, you've got, do these 3 things, and then do these 5 things, and then here's the
Yeah.
steps to, and here's some example script. And I just kept it, oh, okay, and then what next, and what next, and what next. And it's at the end, it's got this really neat looking essentially proposal for
Yeah.
a data store application, or a data container application that could legitimately web scrape for data,
Yeah.
but it absolutely won't work because there's no way to tell it how to federate a login for Facebook that will be
Oh,
allowed.
yes. You can't get access. You
So
can't
none
get
of it
access
matters.
to the data source. But if it was
Yeah,
anywhere else, this is
yeah,
what would work.
right, yeah, and so none of it really mattered, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That just wasted a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I'll admit that was probably, me, oh, oops, but still, is the end result is useless,
Yeah.
and that took my time.
But
And
it took your time. It also, and you've got a learning model too. So part of it, you're reinforcing to chat that this is gonna work, right? Until some
right.
point to you get the
Mhm.
end, and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
this is never gonna work. So I think we do have a responsibility to give that feedback
Mhm.
so that it's not learning the wrong stuff. When you see something that's not the output that you expected, or this, share that. This is
Mhm.
not what I asked
Yes.
for. This is not, I
Mhm.
mean,
Yep.
because at least you've got that opportunity. I mean, Alexa on, Amazon stuff, um, the idea is there, but it's so funny now because Chat GPT with OpenAI is so much more advanced
Mhm.
than Alexa that I get frustrated with Alexa. I'm like, okay, just stop. Just stop. I can't. You're not even close. It's
Yep.
just,
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, there is a significant difference too in because that's a great example in just the capabilities of trained machine learning models, which is really all the large language models for the GPTs now.
Yeah. It's exciting stuff. I could probably talk to you for days. So I do want to I do want to have you back on at some point.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think it'd be a really cool conversation to find out. I want to hear more about the geospatial, just the thinking and actually the real application of that stuff in what you've learned and what you're coming across, especially with the rapid fire pace of the stuff that's going on. Because I love the blend, the merging, if you will. I think strategy, it plays a really strong role. And the fact that you're coupling strategy and leadership, and the leadership skills that are human side of it are very powerful. So I think that's and very needed. So cool stuff. So what are one or two things, Mark, that you'd love people to walk away with from all the stuff that we chatted about today?
There are, on the leadership side, there's a very important understanding that, like I mentioned early on in the conversation, that leadership really is a profession, and we do not, those who voice it as a soft skill or something like that don't do it justice, possibly dismissing it because it seems inconvenient. Leadership is in fact a profession, and with my background, I've seen various levels of both leadership competence and incompetence. Those who treat it as though it is their professional responsibility are the ones who tend to get it right. So yes, there are lots of skills. Yes, that means there's a lot to learn, but I also think it's imperative, if you want to succeed, especially in the middle of the 21st century, if you want to succeed, understanding what those skills are, all the depth and detail is going to be really, really important. And I think number two is strategy is an often overused term, to the point that it's tacked onto other words and phrases simply to make them sound cool. And if you see people talking about strategic something or other, fill in the blank, or we're gonna look at the 3 best strategies to do something or other, be skeptical. And the reason to be skeptical is that they've probably simply replaced the term method or system with the word strategy, because it sounds cool, and strategy has a definition and it has a doctrine, and it's about how you think about the future. And strategy is being a good strategist requires being able to live with risk. You have to be a risk taker to be a good strategist, and you have to be very risk aware to be a good strategist. And I think if you want to be an excellent business person, if you want to be a top achiever, you got to get really good at strategy.
Strategy, when I think about it, unless you've got a crystal ball that works really, really well, there is risk, because we don't know. We don't know. The other part of it is we can make really solid decisions and estimations, and we have to have a tolerance for it kind of fell short. And if you're fricking hitting this stuff year after year, you're not challenging yourself enough. You left a lot on the table.
Yep, absolutely.
So thank you for the time. I appreciate this.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I had fun. So this has been Leadership Soundbites with Michele and Mark. Until next time, please like, share, subscribe. And if you've got a topic that you want to chat about, reach out. It's fun stuff. All right, until next time.